Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin. And trouble brewing in the Mideast. Elections have consequences, my friend, Dr. Lopkin. And Trump, the racist, the anti-Semite, had Israel in the best position they've been in since their inception. How does that sound?
Yes,
and
it did.
On a sideline, that he also had African Americans economically and I would have to say spiritually in the best place, meaning mindset-wise. And it's all because elections have consequences. And if anyone believes that Hamas, Palestinians didn't see numbnuts, excuse my language, as an opportunity to go hog wild, then I have a bridge to sell you in New York. Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing.
And plus, as a little, I'm sorry, my fault. And also knowing the soft underbelly of the Democratic Party, which is, on a good day, quasi-anti-Semitic. So go ahead, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, eight months ago, we had 5 separate peace treaties in the Middle East being signed. That was historic. We actually had a chance to have peace in the Middle East. Biden, the international community knows Biden is weak. Hamas knows Biden is weak, and he knows the U.S. is not going to get involved. So
actually, I have to interject one thing, Dr. Lopkin. Weak, I'm sorry to say, as the teacher in me, is way too weak. He's incapable. No, they know he is incapable, and we'll go on from there. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, he is absolutely incompetent. Hamas knows that they're not going to face real opposition from the United States, especially when we've got the Squad championing the terrorists. Representative Ilya came out yelling that Israel was blowing up a Muslim holy site. And, of course, she forgot to mention that holy site was holding a weapons stockpile from Hamas.
Okay. This is the real intellectual discussion, Dr. Lopkin. And I'm going to throw in African Americans into the mix as well. Let's talk about Jews first. I'm Jewish, so I have the right to, I think it gives me free reign to say whatever I want about Jewish issues at least. And my question to you, Dr. Lopkin, is why would anyone, and Jews, stereotypically are pretty educated, why would you vote for Biden, knowing full well the Democratic Party's shift towards anti-Semitism, anti-Israelism, and he wasn't a nice guy, you're not going to date him, he's not your father, your husband. Trump, with all his idiosyncrasies, was the best friend to Israel since Ronald Reagan. Your comments, sir.
He absolutely was. And the Prime Minister of Israel actually said that. It is beyond my comprehension how, if you care about what's going on in the Middle East, if you are Jewish and you care at all about Israel, and I'll be perfectly honest here, I'm not a big fan of Israel. I don't like a lot of their actions, but it is important that they be allowed to exist, which is the only condition they have ever insisted on for a peace treaty. And Hamas, the Palestinians, refuse to say, yes, they're allowed to exist.
Okay, a couple things. I am not a religious Jew by any stretch of the imagination. okay? But I am a strong believer in Israel because I think in the end, call me a fatalist, that without Israel, the Jews are destined for, let's just say, negative consequences. Yeah, Israel's not perfect. Yes, 1,000%. Right. And by the way, with the Palestinian issue, in 1992, Barak, I forgot his exact name, my fault, my bad. Anyway, him and Arafat had a conference at Oslo, and even Arafat was shocked by the concessions Israel was going to give. So don't cry me a river about what's going on with the Palestinians. Israel 92, and by the way.
Exactly.
Yes. So cry me a river, and it is a fact of life that Jewish people should understand that without Israel, you're sunk. And that's a fact.
That's true. And I don't
understand
hold that thought 1 second, because I do want to invite our listeners to participate in the conversation. You can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Yes. So it just boggles my mind that if you did a demographic study on Jewish people in America, I would say maybe the average American has like maybe a 50% of Americans went to college. I would have to say in the Jewish constituency, it might be 80 or something of that nature. So-called intelligent people would vote for their own demise. Please comment on that, because it is voting for your own demise. Because I'm not a religious Jew, but I do admire and identify with the Jewish as Jews as a people, and I think there's a lot of proud tradition there. And liberal Jews in America that are completely different than Jews in Israel essentially voted for their own demise. Comment.
Yeah, I don't understand. And it's not even that this should have come as a surprise to Jewish voters, because Obama was not a friend of Israel. And, let's face it, the Obama-Biden administration tried to weaken Israel.
They hung Israel out to dry. They didn't try to weaken him. They hung him out to dry.
I was being polite, but okay. But Trump reversed everything they did, which is actually my point. Trump
Do you know what the irony is, Dr.
a great friend to them, and they just hung Trump out to dry. They kept yelling, "Oh, he's an anti-Semite." Nobody has ever
he has people
been able
in his family that are Jewish.
Right. Nobody has ever been able to give one example of anti-Semitism coming from Trump, the Trump family, or the Trump administration, and yet they kept.
But doesn't that relate to the media as well? Because Obama, you could make the case. I don't truly believe it. There was undercurrents in his administration of anti-Semitism. The press never picked up on that. Why wasn't he an anti-Semite? He did more. Of any president, Jimmy Carter was not a fan of Israel. That I just know because I know history. Okay, there was no one in modern history in terms of American presidency that was more anti-Israel than Obama, and Biden was a part of it. And because he's not in charge, but because he's not in charge, I believe. And there was an article, Susan Rice, who's a noted anti-Semite, anti-Israeli person, is really the shadow president. So I'm going to let you talk because I've talked enough. Go ahead, Dr. Lopkin.
Well, I don't know about Rice being the shadow president. I haven't.
No. I've always thought that.
I'm just saying I don't have information on it.
Okay.
But it is
there's several articles about it, yes.
But it is absolutely ridiculous. And again, this administration is picking up the anti-Israeli momentum from the Obama administration. And, you asked earlier why the media never criticized Obama for his anti-Israel stance. And the fact of the matter is, they never criticized Obama for anything, because as soon as anybody criticized him, they were called a racist. And that shuts down the argument, because God forbid you should have to argue on facts when you can just say, oh, well, he's a racist, she's a racist. That was
something that's
to
interesting,
defending
Dr.
the
Lopkin?
administration.
Do you know what's fascinating, Dr. Lopkin? You bring up a point that I think is amazing. It started with Obama, that you can't criticize. This is a really good metaphysical theory here. You couldn't criticize Obama because he was African American. So the press took a free pass. They criticized Carter. They criticized other. So it was kind of like a vacation time. During that vacation, it's not about race now. It's about ideology. And they don't criticize Biden either. So it went from not criticizing for ethnic reasons to not criticizing for political reasons. I believe the transformation has happened.
Well, I think the not criticizing for political reasons has less to do with Biden himself and more to do with the fact that they are still throwing a temper tantrum over how wrong they were about the 2016 election. They hated Trump. They didn't want him to be president. And now, of course, they're not going to criticize Biden because Biden's their boy. Biden's the guy that got rid of Trump for them, so they're now beholden.
No, 100%. They own it. But I think, yes, in terms of the media, it's not about being proven wrong. I also think it's about being embarrassed because they live on both coasts, and they always poo-pooed Trump as the knuckle dragger because they're so out of touch. And it's so amazingly interesting that the Democratic Party, when I was a kid a billion years ago, used to be the party of the blue-collar Chicago union person. That train has so left the station. They're Wall Street because they prosper and the underclass. And the more underclass you can have, and it's almost like Roman times, the more underclass you can have to support the elite, that is the Democratic Party. Your comments, Dr. Eric Lopkin.
It's definitely, ironically, Bernie Sanders said the same thing. The Democrats of today are not the Democrats of 20 years ago, 30 years ago. John F. Kennedy would be thrown out of the Democratic Party now for being too conservative. And they have completely flipped from what JFK stood for. Remember, his big speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And this has completely been flipped. It's like, no, the country is responsible for doing everything for you, so you don't have to do anything because we want to buy your votes.
And actually, on an interesting point, I was taking a hike with someone, and it's very interesting. We were talking about just the state of the economy, whatever, and he knows some local businesses that can't get people because if someone makes $11 an hour, you get why? And it's going on for forever. It's like not just like 3 months of unemployment when you got to get your shit together and get a job. It's like a year. So if you're some person that worked at Starbucks making it equals, I think, over $15 an hour just hanging out.
Yeah,
watching video games, watching Netflix.
It's going to end up being at least 18 months that they're keeping the unemployment going. And I had a conversation just this morning with a local supermarket owner, and they usually get 100 to 200 job applications every week. Right now, they've got 30. They cannot fill all of the spaces they have because they don't have enough applicants. And, of course, the liberals are yelling, well, then they should be paying better. The margins
then you go out of business because
the margins on a supermarket are so thin,
razor thin.
They can't afford to pay more without passing that cost on to the consumer. And then,
but when you're Nancy Pelosi living in a gated community, you don't really care about passing costs. I think we're up against a break, Dr. Lopkin.
We are, and we will be right back.
To reach the next level, you need to operate at peak performance. The key to this is mastering the 7 elements of success. Learn how to master mindset, focus, operations, communications, innovation, evaluation metrics, and continuous improvement. Get the Biznetics way at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and bookstores near you.
And we're back. And again, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. But yeah, I think
Dr. Lopkin,
the basic problem is that the liberals do not really understand how the world functions.
Well, they don't know business. It's all theoretical.
Right. They think, all business owners are rich. They can just, they can raise prices. They can hire whoever they want and pay, but they choose not to. And that's simply not fact.
Well, no. They don't like, I'll go a step further. They don't like, because it's what I said about Israel. I'm not tying the two together in any way. They don't like achievers. Okay? They just think that, someone who owns a business is just set for life, and that's not true. They're taking tremendous risks, and like you said, in the grocery business, it's razor thin.
Right. It comes up also, when they talk about, $15 minimum wage. Well, let's take a quick look at how that really works. It starts with the farm. Okay, so now the farmer has to pay anybody that's working there $15. So everybody's getting a raise there. So that means it's more expensive for him to raise the crops. They sell the product to a wholesaler. The wholesalers now has to raise the salaries of their people, and it's not just the people making minimum wage, because if somebody was making $15 before, you can't keep them at $15 if now the minimum wage people are going to be there.
Of course not.
So the wholesalers now have to raise the salaries of their people, plus they have to pay more for the product. Then the food goes to the supermarket. The supermarket has to raise the salaries of their people to comply with the new minimum wage, plus they're paying even more for what they're getting for the wholesalers. So guess what? Everybody's making more money. Food prices have gone up, and the cost of food has actually gone up enough that it cancels the benefit of raising the minimum wage.
Yes, and my question, the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin, who benefits and who suffers? Well, not benefits. No one really benefits. Who goes unscathed and who benefits? Dr. Eric Lopkin.
But nobody really benefits. It's a hardship on everybody.
I disagree. I think Nancy Pelosi there's no impact on this. When you're a multimillionaire that's fed off the government forever, no impact. If you're a hedge fund manager worth $60 million.
Yeah, but they're not benefiting. They're just not impacted.
The Democratic constituency that is ruling, not the ones that they're subjugating, but the ones that are ruling have zero impact. The African Americans, the Hispanics that are making money or making ends meet hand to mouth, they suffer, but that's all in the big scheme of things, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, let's face it. If you are poor, whether you're African American, Caucasian, Asian, it doesn't matter. If you are economically disadvantaged, and the Democrats are saying, well, you know what? We don't want you to be disadvantaged. We're going to give you money. Who are you going to vote for? But realistically, all they're doing is making the problem worse let's put that money that would be going to job training, to fixing the education. They don't want to fix the problem.
They're not into strengthening it. They don't care. They don't really even like America. It's all about power. And you know something? You have a great point, Dr. Locke, because if I'm a liquor store owner, okay, making 100 or 80 grand, I'm talking not gross revenue, when it's all trickled down and what I'm taking home, plus I got to pay insurance, I got to pay, into Social Security, all that. It gets to a point where you say, the heck with this, I'm just going on the dole. And when does it become
what's happening?
No more?
That's what's happening now. Why businesses can't find enough people to hire, because the unemployment benefit is so high that people are going, well, you know what? I'm getting more money from the government. Why should I take a job?
Do you know what's interesting about that, Dr. Lopkin? Because the people that are doing that are probably not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. Because I do know certain things, and this I can say, I can etch it in stone. Once you have been unemployed for over a year, let's say, yeah, you can get a job at a grocery store or whatever. I get it, okay? So if that's the equation, fine. Any kind of higher aspirations, may God be with you. Am I correct or not?
There is, if you have been working.
Zero chance of getting a job. What have you done over the last year? It's
not zero, because there are things you can do in the meanwhile to make sure you're still employable. But the problem is when you're out of work and you are getting this unemployment check, but you have worked before. I'm not talking about folks that are, being a cashier and now they're out of work. I'm talking about folks that had careers. When you are unemployed for a good amount of time, the mental stress is ridiculous. It is depressing. And that keeps you out of the job market, because as you're dealing with that depression, you're not keeping your skills up. You're not really looking. And it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, 100% agree. I agree with all that. But I also think it's something that my aunt told me. You talk about Jewish wisdom. She said, people always want what they can't have. So if you're employed, and believe me, I know this, when you're employed, and I'm talking a real job, not like, whatever. So when you're employed and you go for a job interview, people can't have enough of you. When you're unemployed, and then when you're unemployed for a year, may Jesus Christ be with you, because you're in deep doo-doo. I guarantee you, I don't know a lot
it's always easier to get a job when you have a job.
It's not even easy. It's exponentially easier. Yes. Now, I want to close on one thing, because I don't get emotional a lot on this show, and I'm going out on a limb, but I really despise Bernie Sanders. And I despise him because I'm Jewish. And there's nothing worse than a self-hating Jew. And that's what he is. He's warming up to AOC that would be the first one to do bad things. We'll just leave it at that. No, hates Jews, hates Israel. Bernie Sanders is one of the most despicable people in American modern-day politics. He is disgusting. He is someone that puts his own agenda ahead of everything. And any Jew, if you're not Jewish, fine, go vote for him, whatever. God bless you. If you're Jewish and you vote for this creep who never had a job, he was writing porn articles, right. I don't know, when he was like 30. But never had a job till 40, and he's a self-hating Jew. Dr. Lopkin. Yeah.
You have to remember, you just said, you can't understand why any Jew would vote for him. Most Jews don't. That's one of the reasons he moved to Vermont, where there's such a small Jewish population. He's always been a self-hating Jew. He hates the way he grew up. He moved from a Jewish neighborhood up to Vermont, where, let's face it, what's the irony of somebody yelling about diversity from Vermont? Okay? I mean, you're talking about white bread and mayonnaise in Vermont.
Hello. Yes,
he
there's
has
like one black, and 3 blacks in Vermont and like 5 Jews last time I saw it.
Yeah,
although the New York population's growing. Go ahead.
He has always hated being Jewish. He has always been a self-hating Jew. He wants to distance himself from his history to the point, he tells this story about, how he struggled and how his family struggled. I grew up in the same neighborhood that Bernie Sanders grew up in, albeit quite a number of years later. But I know the history of the neighborhood. The poor folks that lived in that neighborhood that wanted their kids to go to college, they went to Brooklyn College. They didn't go to University of Chicago. So
he went to University of Chicago?
Yes.
Oh, God. The guy's a complete phony. He's despicable in every way. And if you're not Jewish, you should still despise him because he's like, do as I say, not as I do. He's
a millionaire.
Bankrupt a university.
Yeah, he's a millionaire socialist.
The lazy piece of what. Never worked a day until he was 40. He wrote like porn for like some kind of penthouse thing. You despicable person. I mean, imagine not having a job till you're 40, and it wasn't even a real job. It was like, mayor of some Vermont, whatever. And now you are Bernie Sanders. Basically, I'm going to say the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. What do you think in closing, Dr. Eric Lopkin?
I don't think he's the de facto leader. Because even AOC doesn't pay attention to him. He has basically been eliminated. He's another one, no legacy. He has passed the baton to the squad because, the Bernie
You don't find that disturbing, Dr. Lopkin?
Oh, it's incredibly disturbing.
That a Jewish person would hand the baton. It's like handing the baton to Goering. Hello, genius.
Well, but again, he's been a self-hating Jew his entire life. So what does he care if they go after Jews, if they go after Israel? Why should he care? It just proves his point. They're saying, well, look at the bad things the Jews are doing.
God, that is really disturbing to me, Dr. Lopkin. But you know something? Usually we have a guest, and sometimes when we don't, it still works out quite nicely. And I think this was a heated show, but a very good show. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, it was a good show. I mean, it's heated because what's going on in this country right now is absolutely disgusting.
It's disgusting.
The fact of the matter is, throughout the entire presidential campaign, even going back to the primaries, every Democratic candidate campaigned on, we have to bring America together. And they have done nothing to bring America together.
Okay,
they have made the problem so much worse.
Lopkin. Their shtick and their ideology is to divide and conquer. It's out of the Communist Manifesto, and that's exactly what it is. But Dr. Lopkin, as we go into the weekend, it's going to be nice weather. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope we have more callers in the upcoming episodes because I think we have a hot show. What do you think?
Absolutely. Although I will say, I know a lot of people listen to the show on the replay, so they can't call in with the replay. But let's pay attention to what's going on live. And remember, we're live here every Friday at 4:00 at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. And if you can't be here live, you can still listen to the replays at xvadio.com/podcasts, along with our Carnivore Bites podcast, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. We're looking forward to hearing from you. We'll see you next week.
Dr. Lopkin, I could not imagine a better partner than you. So have a great weekend, and have a great weekend for our listeners. Take care.